The Snow Bear, which I'm really excited about. I knew that I wanted to write a really lovely Christmassy story, and it's about a girl who goes to stay with her grandfather and is absolutely snowed in. They're completely surrounded by snow, which really reminds me of the winter when I was about 10 years old, when we really did have the most amazingly heavy snowfall. We were, even though I didn't live in the countryside, we were quite cut off. We couldn't really go anywhere. Couldn't go to school. It was really exciting. The snow was so deep that our dog was actually practically up to her nose in it, and it was just so exciting. And I wanted to capture some of that amazing feeling of being snowed in, and I also wanted to tell a story about a beautiful place and very special creatures. I've always loved polar bears. This is Polar. It was my childhood teddy bear. He's actually Polar number 2 because Polar number 1 was left in a restaurant in France when I was about 4, and I was so distraught that my parents had to buy me a replacement. But I still have him. He's about 30 years old, and he's looking quite battered. But I really do love polar bears, and I'm sure Polar is one of the main reasons why I've always had a strong feeling about them. And I knew that I wanted to write a book about polar bears and how special they were. Yes, I mean, I knew little bits about polar bears, but I didn't know a great deal about Inuit culture and about the Arctic in general. And it's something that I'm interested in, especially the environmental aspects of worrying about polar ice caps melting. And I did do quite a lot of research, and I ended up knowing some really strange facts, like some Inuit builders, when they were building snow houses, used to use the stomach of a seal as a window, because apparently if you stretch it out enough, it's almost see-through and you can use it as a window, which was definitely something I didn't know before. Well, I used to really love a book called The Box of Delights by John Masefield, which is all about a magical journey. But the thing that really annoyed me about it was that at the very end of the book, it's all a dream. And it seemed really disappointing. And so when I wrote The Snow Bear, I wanted to find a way that the story was somehow real. Even though it was an amazing dreamlike journey, there would be something at the end that would make it seem as though it had really happened. And so, well, you'll have to read it to find out how that happens. I would, although I'm not very good at being cold. I suffer terribly when I get cold, and so I'm slightly worried about going to the Arctic. I would love to see the Northern Lights though, and I would love to see real polar bears in their own homeland. Well, a lot of them are based on stories that I remember about the cats and dogs I had when I was a child, and the cats and dogs that I have now. And also people tell me stories because they know that I write books, and I get told amazing stories about people's pets. I went to a school recently where a little boy told me about his mum's dog who used to climb out of the window and follow her to school, which I put into one of my recent books. Somewhere over 60. I do tend to lose count because once I've written one, it's hard to remember whether it's been, what stage it's at, whether it's been published or not, and then I lose track of how many I've done. I think it would probably be Lost in the Snow, which is the first animal book that I wrote, and I really love that book. The mother cat was named after the cat that I had when I was a child, and it's a really special book. That's very tricky. There's a very gorgeous Dachshund character in a book called The Lost Puppy, who's called Toby, and he's very much based on the dog I had as a child, who was called Max, who was a wire-haired Dachshund, who was just as naughty and downright badly behaved as Toby is in the book. At the moment, I write in a wonderful new workroom, which I've only just had built. We've had some work done on our house, which is fantastic because it means I can put everything down in one place and not have to move it around and expect it'll still be there when I go back to it. And it's wonderful. It's going to have a very beautiful purple armchair in it, but it hasn't arrived yet. But it's great just to have a really private place where I can put everything down and think and keep really quiet. called Marble, which I know sounds a funny name for a cat, but she's a tabby cat with a lovely swirly grey and black coat, and she looks like a slice of that special marble cake where you mix chocolate cake and sponge cake together, so she's called Marble. Yes, my first pet that actually belonged to me was a mouse called Truffle. He was called Truffle because he looked like chocolate. It's sort of a theme of food and pets coming through here, I think. And he was very, very beautiful, but unfortunately he wasn't the world's healthiest mouse, and he used to live an awful lot of the time in an ice cream carton on top of the Arga because he kept having colds. He was a very snuffly mouse. Actually, when I was a child, I didn't want to be an author at all. I wanted to be a librarian because I thought librarians just got to sit in the library and read all the books all the time. Then I discovered that they have to do lots of other things as well, and it's not nearly as exciting. But I started work as an editor instead, working on other authors' books. I worked as an editor for about 6 years, and then by pure chance, we were planning a new series for girls, and we were all sitting around a table brainstorming ideas. I came up with an idea of triplet girls and writing a series about these 3 sisters who would look identical but would be really different on the inside. And somehow the idea, I loved it so much I didn't want somebody else to write it. So I secretly went away and wrote this book. And most of the time I actually wrote it sitting on the floor of trains because I was commuting from Reading to London, and the trains were so busy that I could never get anywhere to sit down. So I had a notebook and I sat on the floor of the train writing this first book. And then actually the worst part was then I had to tell everybody I worked with that I'd written it. And in fact, I wasn't brave enough to do that. I printed it out and left a copy on someone's desk with a note because I was too scared to tell them what I'd done. But luckily they liked it, otherwise it could have been really, really embarrassing. I suppose it's being able to imagine that you're creating these characters and worlds, and then actually other people are going to read them. And I found that very hard to believe for quite a long time, that there were actually people reading my books. And I loved reading so much as a child, and I absolutely loved travelling to other places with authors. And the idea that people are doing that through my books now is just absolutely wonderful, and that's my absolute favourite thing.